Hi, so this is a video to go over the sky asset. There are two versions of this. They're both stored under Assets, Sets, Sky, and then Model. There's sky.ma and skyhigh.ma. Sky.ma is essentially one that will work fully in the standard viewport 2.0. But I'm going to start using Sky High more often, but just because that's the version that will render properly in Redshift. So I just want to do a tutorial to show how it's going to get used, so that you can easily change the color of the sky to suit your needs. Now, so this is what it looks like when you play this thing. This is a single view inside the dome, looking out. With everything animating. But let me just show you roughly what this thing is. So it's a series of spheres inside of each other. The main color is labeled color. It's the outside sphere. This one you can choose basically on a gradient what the color of everything looks like, and I'll show you some more details about that. Then inside of that we've got three other layers, layer 1, 2, and 3, and these are all slightly differently orientated spheres that have these sort of puffy effects on top. Now actually the color layer also has some puff in it, but the one on the three layers in front of it actually help us create a puff that works in all three axes, because what you don't want to do is just look down or look up or something like that and you see all the texture mapping converge onto a point, which is why I had to create three unique spheres, but they all have exactly the same shader on them, so you can manipulate those three as one essentially. Then there's another one here which more often than not you'll probably want to have hidden, but if you unhide that, it's the clouds layer. And this is used when you want to transition within a scene from day to cloud, for example, because you can actually wipe the clouds over the sky. But most of the time it doesn't quite look as nice as the other ones do. So let's say you're in a cloudy environment for the whole scene, there would be no point using clouds. You would literally just hide the cloud layer and make the sky look the way that you want it to look, because you can make it look prettier. So the only reason to use clouds as a layer is if you actually have a transition during the course of the scene, which there are in, I think, end of day 2 or 3, I think. So anyway, let me go over the shaders on this, which is basically where you want to spend your time on this. So select the color, and what we've got here is a layered texture feeding into a shader. And this is the main one. You simply go in here and choose the colors that you want. You can do it by pulling the colors literally from the concept art. If you go to the resources page, let's see, go to resources, bring this up here. There's usually a video like this one here. And you can scrub to where you need to go. I don't know whether you can color pick from this, but we can try. So let's say you're interested in this color palette over here. You could go to this gradient here and literally color pick from, let's say I want this to be my dark tone, and I want this to be my lights. Okay. Now obviously pulling from a YouTube video is kind of annoying, so maybe the better thing to do is to go here. If you follow this link right here, it will bring you to a page where you can download a MOV file and just keep it handy on your machine. But basically the idea is that you pull the colors directly from the artwork, you create the gradient that you're looking for. I'm just going to undo those for now. And this gradient represents what's happening all the way across the sphere. Let me hide this for now, put the camera on the inside and do a little render. Okay, so Let's do an IPR. What you can see here is what it looks like if I change my orientation. Now this is based on the gradient, so you can see that there's generally a color shift from top to bottom. It's not necessarily as pretty as it could be, but basically you want to choose that gradient based on what you feel like the color of the sky is in that particular situation. Now, on top of the sky, we have a theoretical forest. Now think of everything in the film is occurring inside of a forest, and the light is passing through the undergrowth of the forest and it's all blurred out. So the color you choose in that gradient I was just talking about there is actually the color of the sky from above you down to the horizon. Next, on top of that, you're going to have the color of the forest. So if you want to adjust the color of the forest, let's have a look. It's actually, I think it's in here. Yeah, now I've got this gradient here is defining the color of the darker objects in the foreground of the sky, which are blocking the light, but the light is breaking through between them. You could get literal and throw in green here, but I'm finding that it kind of doesn't look very nice, and it certainly doesn't match the overall color hues that we're looking for from the concept art. So I went a little bit more artistic here and threw in different colors. And again, this represents the color from top to bottom. So if and it's affecting on top of the sky color. But between it, the lighter spots, that's the sky showing through the forest, if you see what I mean. Now, right now we've got some pretty good settings on that movement that you were seeing in the video. Let me just play that again for you. You can probably just use that for most of the film, but there may be occasions where we want to speed up time or have some more frenetic movement in the sky, perhaps, in which case you might mess around with these the animation on these noise nodes. But for now, probably don't want to mess around with that too much. This is defining, let me see, I think that one's just defining the upper sky, and then this is covering the seams at the edge of the textures, and this one's covering the floor, but I think many of those are just there as backups. Yeah, that's what I thought. They're not actually active. Notice the only two layers that are active right now is the sky color and the forest color. The rest of them are just there in the off chance that we actually have to point the camera in a particular direction and we can't just turn the dome or something like that. So they're really just backups. So anyway, that covers the main color, and then when I turn on this, you get additional effects on top. Let me hide this so that you can see exactly what this is. So these layers are literally just a sort of puffiness, and they're moving around. Now, in the middle of the day, you might want those to be quite bright, because it might feel cool to put, you know, bright lights that feel like they're passing through the leaves and things. But in darker scenes, you probably want to tint those down. Let me try to pull. Here we go. So this is where you'll manipulate those. Let me just go over here. They feel a bit like clouds, but they move a lot like light passing through trees. I think my shortcuts are all messed up, so I can't actually see the attributes. Channel editor, that's kind of annoying. Right, so in essence, the easiest way to manipulate these is with the channel control viewer, but right now I can't get the shortcut to come up, so I'm going to have to just... Here we go. It's this is what I'm talking about. Okay. Right. So if you select all of these and go into here, you can change the color of this by just changing the color on those things. I think, is it here? Let me just check. Ramp color. Right. One overall way you could do it is to tweak this. I think that's right. Is that working? Yes, it is. So this is adjusting the hues based on the red, green and blue, and that affects all three. Another way to do this is like this. Default color 0.5. You could just go 0.1. Nope, that's not it. 1. No, okay, I'm looking at the wrong value there. 0.5 again. Maybe it's the color again. 0.1. Yeah, okay, so that is affecting it, but it's not quite what I was trying to get across. But essentially you can see that by manipulating these values, the reason there are 3 of them going into one node is because they have a little bit of an offset on them. The idea is that there's a red, green and blue offset to give us a sort of chromatic distortion, and I don't think we need to mess with that too much. I think it's set up quite well. But basically there is an offset somewhere in this. I'm trying to remember where I put it. That creates that offset. Let me see where I put it. I can't remember where I put it. If we need to get into that, I can dig around later. But basically, the reason there's 3 of them is because they are all slightly offset, so that when you see the render up close, it feels like a sort of chromatic distortion, which is kind of cool. Okay, so anyway, that's a pretty straightforward thing. It just kind of adds on top of the color. And then if you need to mess around with clouds on top of this, let me show you this one from up here. I wonder if we can even see this in here. Let's just try this. No, I don't think so. Oh wait, okay, render. Here we go. So you can see that the top of the dome looks like this. And if it's essentially that sort of light purple is the idea of some clouds. And we can wipe that back around the dome as we prefer, and obviously you can rotate the dome to get it where you need it, and then you can have something wipe over the sky. Right, so let's bring up the shader for this one. Okay, this was a bit of a simpler one. Essentially, this controls the position and the brightness of the clouds. And into this we've got some noise being pumped into the transitional colors so that it breaks it up and makes it look a little bit more like real clouds. Whilst this ramp controller defines the color of the cloud. So if you need it to be darker, then you just move these over. Sorry, my machine's just being slow. Don't know why it needs to load a hard drive up in order for me to manipulate a shader. But there you go, so you can see the color changing on that. So that defines the color of the shade, the cloud. And I think in many cases the easiest thing if you want to transition that cloud is to actually just rotate the dome. But if you want to, you can also just animate the position of this ramp to give yourself a little bit more control. But like I said, I don't think you're going to need that in a lot of cases. So for now, let's turn that one off. Yeah, so this is it. Unfortunately, Redshift, I'm not sure how to get it to... What I usually like to do is hide the outside of the dome so that you only see the inside so it's one-sided render, but Redshift doesn't seem to want to do that, so you have to actually position your camera inside of it to see what you're doing and then move around. But there you go. So you can get some quite pretty effects, and I think most of the time we're not going to be looking for anything this strong. I mean, we might actually go for simpler colors in most things, but it'll give the sky a little bit of life. One of the things we have to bear in mind as well is that if this is too busy, I mean this is pretty slow, you have to really be looking at it to see what's happening, and there's a reason for that. It's because we don't want it to be too distracting from what's happening in the foreground. But if it is too distracting, then maybe we want to slow down the effect even more. I'd be surprised if there's any situation in which we need it to go too fast. The only thing I can think of is when we speed up time, maybe we want to accelerate the effect just a little bit. And in those situations, because the animation is actually in the reference file, there's two ways to edit that. Either we go into the settings for Maya and tell it that we would like to edit the animation, which I'm trying to remember where that option is. Auto key, rotation, tangents. There's an option in here anyway that I'd have to go fishing for, that allows you to change referenced keys. As a rule of thumb, I don't like to use it. I'm not seeing it right now. We can dig it out later. I don't really like to use that if possible, because it can cause problems. It might be the quick way to do it, but it might even be safer to just import the reference and then modify the keys that way. We can cross that bridge when we get to it. But anyway, that's how to use the Skytone. Hopefully that helps. Give me a shout if you've got any questions about it. Thanks.